Picture this, a woman in a perfectly pressed tennis outfit standing next to a demolition crew at 7 in the morning, arms crossed, watching them set up to destroy someone's life work. That's Beverly Stanford, treasurer of Madison Grove HOA, and she's got that smug look people get when they think they finally crushed their enemy. What Beverly doesn't know is that I'm watching from my kitchen window, holding a manila folder that's about to turn her world upside down. See, she thought she was dealing with just another resident she could bully into submission. She had no idea I'm a physical therapist who knows exactly how much those medical procedures she's been billing the HOA for actually cost. And let me tell you, the numbers don't add up. Not even close, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a guy who just wanted to make art in his backyard ended up bringing down a financial empire built on lies. Hey, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know if HOAs everywhere are this corrupt, or if we just got unlucky here in Colorado. Have you ever had neighbors complain about your hobbies? I'd love to hear your stories. My name's Lucas Anderson, and up until 8 months ago, I thought the biggest drama in my life was helping athletes recover from career-ending injuries. I'm a physical therapist at Denver Sports Medicine, and let me tell you, working with people who've lost everything they've trained their whole lives for, it takes a toll on you. That's where the blacksmithing came in. My grandfather immigrated from the old country with nothing but his hammer, tongs, and a leather apron that still hangs in my garage. He taught me the craft when I was 12, right before the cancer took him. Said the rhythm of the hammer on steel was like meditation, that it could cure whatever was eating at your soul. He wasn't wrong. After spending 8 hours a day watching grown men cry because they'll never play football again, coming home to the forge was the only thing that kept me sane. The weight of the hammer in my hands, the orange glow of heated steel, the satisfying ring when metal meets metal, it washed away everything else. Madison Grove seemed like the perfect place for it. Middle-class neighborhood with big backyards, lots of families who appreciated handmade things. Colorado's always been friendly to makers and artists, especially around Denver. Plus, my mom lived just 20 minutes away, which mattered more than I'd like to admit. Mom's got Alzheimer's. Early onset hit her at 62 like a freight train. The memory care facility runs about $4,000 a month, and Medicare doesn't cover nearly enough. My art sales, mostly decorative gates, custom fireplace tools, and the occasional sculpture, brought in about $25,000 a year. Every penny went to keeping her somewhere safe and comfortable. The forge itself was nothing fancy. Traditional coal setup in a converted garage bay, anvil my grandfather brought over in 1952, and tools that had been in our family for 4 generations. I'd fire it up around 6 at night when I got home from work, maybe work until 9 or 10. Weekends I'd start earlier, especially if I had a commission deadline. For 2 years, everything was perfect. Neighbors would stop by to watch me work, kids loved seeing the sparks fly. I sold pieces at the Cherry Creek Arts Festival, had a small following at local galleries. The rhythmic hammering became part of the neighborhood soundtrack, like lawnmowers on Saturday morning or the ice cream truck in summer. That's when Beverly Stanford decided I was a problem. Beverly ran the HOA like her personal kingdom, and she had the credentials to back up her authority. Chief accountant at Mountain View Construction, CPA license, immaculate financial records going back 15 years. She lived in the biggest house in the development, drove a white BMW that she washed twice a week, and treated HOA board meetings like corporate presentations. On the surface, she seemed like the kind of treasurer every community association dreams of. Conservative with spending, meticulous with documentation, always found ways to stretch the budget. Under her management, Madison Grove had beautiful landscaping, well-maintained common areas, and reserve funds that actually covered emergency repairs. What nobody knew was that Beverly had been systematically embezzling from those same reserve funds for 4 years. Her scheme was brilliant in its simplicity. As the accountant for Mountain View Construction, she had access to legitimate invoices and estimates. She'd submit inflated bills to the HOA for routine maintenance, $15,000 for a roof repair that actually cost $8,000, $20,000 for parking lot resurfacing that ran $12,000. The difference went straight into her personal accounts. Over 4 years, she'd skimmed over $220,000. Nobody questioned it because the work got done, the properties looked great, and Beverly's reputation was spotless. But here's the thing about criminals, they always get paranoid about getting caught. And by year 4, Beverly's paranoia was focused squarely on me. See, my little blacksmithing operation was attracting attention. Local newspaper did a feature on neighborhood artisans. Denver Arts Magazine mentioned my work. I'd started getting commissioned pieces from across the metro area, and people were driving to Madison Grove to pick up their orders. More traffic meant more eyes on the community. More eyes meant potential scrutiny of how HOA funds were being spent. And Beverly couldn't risk that level of attention, so she decided to shut me down. It started small. A complaint filed with the city about industrial activity in a residential zone. A noise violation report claiming my hammering disrupted the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties. Anonymous calls to the fire department about dangerous equipment and fire hazards. I tried to work with her. Showed up to my first HOA board meeting with a thick folder of documentation, city permits, fire department inspection reports, letters of support from neighbors. I explained that what I was doing was legally classified as home-based art production, not industrial manufacturing. Beverly listened with that patient smile people use when they've already made up their minds. When I finished, she shuffled through some papers and looked up with those cold blue eyes. Mr. Anderson, I appreciate your passion for your hobby, but we have to consider the broader community impact. The noise complaints are mounting, and frankly, your operation sets a precedent we can't allow. What if every resident decided to start their own business out of their garage? The vote was 4-1 against me, with only Tom Martinez, a retired teacher who'd bought one of my sculptured garden gates, dissenting. I had 21 days to cease all blacksmithing operations or face daily fines of $400 a day for working in my own garage, on my own property, doing something completely legal under city and county ordinances. But here's what I learned about HOAs that I wish someone had told me before I bought in Madison Grove. They operate under their own rules. Doesn't matter what the city says is legal, doesn't matter what your property deed allows. If the HOA covenants give them authority over architectural control and community standards, they can shut down pretty much anything they want. The next 3 weeks were hell. I tried everything I could think of, proposed sound-dampening materials, offered to limit my hours, even suggested moving the forge to my basement. Beverly shot down every compromise with the same patient smile and a new reason why it wouldn't work. Meanwhile, the clock kept ticking toward that $400 a day fine. 21 days after that board meeting, I got a certified letter informing me that my industrial operations were officially in violation of Madison Grove community standards. The fines would begin immediately and continue until I removed all blacksmithing equipment from the property. $400 a day, every day, until I gave up the thing that kept me sane. I want you to imagine what that felt like. I'm working with paralyzed athletes all day, watching people lose their identities when their bodies fail them. Then I come home to a letter telling me I'm about to lose the one thing that gave me purpose outside of work. The one thing that was paying for my mother's care. $400 a day meant I'd burn through my savings in 2 months. After that, I'd have to choose between fighting the HOA or moving Mom to a state facility that I wouldn't trust with a stray dog. So I did what any rational person would do. I kept working. Not out of defiance, out of necessity. I had 3 commissioned pieces due before Christmas, including a custom gate for a client in Boulder, who'd already paid me half up front. My mom's facility payment was due in 2 weeks, and I didn't have enough in checking to cover it without the commission money. Every morning, I'd wake up to a new invoice from the HOA. Day 1, $400. Day 2, $800. Day 5, $2,000. By the end of the first month, they claimed I owed them $12,000 in accumulated fines. Beverly escalated the pressure systematically. Anonymous complaints to the fire department increased to twice a week, forcing inspections that always found nothing wrong but cost me hours of lost work time. She got the city to send a zoning inspector who confirmed that my operation was completely legal under municipal codes but couldn't override HOA covenants. The most devastating move was when she went after my day job. Beverly called Denver Sports Medicine and filed a complaint with the clinic director about my unprofessional conduct and disruptive behavior in the community. She claimed that my industrial activities reflected poorly on my judgment and suggested that someone who couldn't follow community rules might not be reliable with patient care. Dr. Patricia Walsh, my supervisor, called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon. She's good people, been practicing sports medicine for 20 years, treats her staff fairly, and generally stays out of personal drama. But she looked uncomfortable as she slid a printed email across her desk. "Lucas, I need you to explain this. I've got the president of an HOA claiming you're operating some kind of unlicensed manufacturing business and violating community agreements. She's asking me to investigate whether this affects your fitness to treat patients." I read Beverly's carefully worded complaint twice. She'd managed to make my blacksmithing sound like I was running a meth lab, all while maintaining plausible deniability if anyone fact-checked her claims. "Dr. Walsh, I make art in my garage. Decorative metalwork, custom gates, sculptures. Everything I do is legal, permitted, and insured. This woman is trying to shut me down because she doesn't like the sound of hammering." Dr. Walsh leaned back in her chair and sighed. "I believe you, Lucas. Your work here is exemplary, and this complaint doesn't match anything I know about your character. But I have to document this conversation, and if she escalates to the state licensing board..." She didn't need to finish. A complaint to the Colorado Physical Therapy Board would trigger an investigation, even if it ultimately went nowhere. During that investigation, I'd be under professional scrutiny, my patient load might get reduced, and my reputation would take a hit that could follow me for years. Beverly was attacking every aspect of my life, systematically destroying everything I'd built. That's when I realized I needed to understand my enemy better. I started showing up to HOA board meetings, not as a resident asking for permission, but as someone who needed to understand how the organization actually worked. Beverly ran those meetings like corporate board sessions, Robert's Rules of Order, formal motions, detailed financial reports that she'd present with PowerPoint slides. And those financial reports were impressive. Under Beverly's management, Madison Grove had accumulated substantial reserve funds, completed major infrastructure improvements, and maintained property values even during market downturns. On paper, she was exactly the kind of HOA treasurer you'd want managing your community's money. But something nagged at me about those numbers. Maybe it was my experience with medical billing, where I'd learned to spot inflated charges and unnecessary procedures. Maybe it was just the paranoia that comes from being under constant attack. But Beverly's financial reports felt too perfect, too convenient. The breaking point came when Beverly made her biggest mistake. 3 months into the fines, which had accumulated to over $35,000 in theoretical debt, Beverly submitted a formal request to the HOA board to hire a medical consultant to document the health impacts of my forge on neighboring residents. She wanted the HOA to pay for audiological testing, sleep studies, and stress evaluations for anyone living within 300 feet of my property. The goal was to build a medical case that my blacksmithing created a hazardous environment that justified not just shutting me down, but potentially pursuing criminal charges for creating a public nuisance. The consultant she recommended was Dr. Marcus Webb from Colorado Occupational Health Services. The proposed fee was $15,000 for comprehensive testing and expert testimony. That night, I sat in my kitchen reading the proposal and something clicked. $15,000 for what should have been maybe $3,000 in actual testing. As someone who dealt with medical billing daily, I knew exactly what legitimate occupational health evaluations cost. More importantly, I knew what impossible medical procedures looked like. See, when you work in physical therapy, you become an expert at reading medical documentation. Insurance companies scrutinize every claim, and if you bill for services that aren't medically necessary or procedures that don't match the patient's condition, you get audited fast. I'd seen plenty of fraudulent billing over the years, chiropractors who claimed to treat conditions they weren't licensed to address, massage therapists who invented diagnoses to justify unnecessary sessions, equipment suppliers who billed for devices that were never delivered. And I'd learned to spot the patterns. Beverly's medical consultant proposal had all the red flags of a billing scam. Unnecessary testing, inflated fees, and procedures that didn't match the alleged problem. If she was willing to waste HOA money on fake medical evaluations, what else might she be faking? That weekend, I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I requested copies of all HOA financial records for the past 5 years. As a homeowner, I had legal right to review how my dues were being spent. Beverly tried to delay, claiming she needed time to organize the documents and redact sensitive information. But Colorado law gives residents 30 days to access HOA financial records, and after some pressure from Tom Martinez, she finally handed over 6 bankers' boxes of invoices, receipts, and monthly reports. I spread everything across my dining room table and started looking for patterns. It took me 3 days to find the smoking gun, hidden in routine maintenance expenses from 2 years back. Beverly had submitted invoices for employee physical therapy services totaling $45,000 over 6 months. The bills claimed that HOA maintenance workers had received injury treatment at Denver Rehabilitation Partners for various work-related conditions. Problem was, I knew Denver Rehab Partners. They'd been bought out by another clinic 18 months ago and hadn't existed when these services were allegedly provided. I dug deeper. Over 4 years, Beverly had submitted medical bills for HOA employees totaling over $180,000. Treatment for herniated discs, rotator cuff injuries, carpal tunnel syndrome, chronic back pain, all supposedly work-related, all covered by HOA insurance, all billed to clinics that I could verify either didn't exist or had never treated the patients listed. And here's where my professional expertise became a weapon. I knew exactly how much these procedures should cost, what treatments were medically appropriate, and which combinations of services were impossible. Beverly had billed for simultaneous physical therapy sessions at clinics 50 miles apart. She'd claimed workers received specialized treatments that required equipment those facilities didn't own. She'd documented recovery timelines that violated basic medical understanding of how long injuries actually take to heal. In one particularly obvious case, she'd billed for 6 months of intensive physical therapy for a maintenance worker who'd allegedly suffered a severe back injury. then billed for the same worker receiving full-body sports conditioning at a different clinic during the exact same time period. Either Madison Grove employed a maintenance team of superhuman athletes who could somehow receive medical treatment in multiple locations simultaneously, or Beverly had been stealing HOA money to pay for fake medical services and pocketing the insurance reimbursements. I spent the next week cross-referencing every medical bill against state licensing databases, facility locations, and insurance claim procedures. What I found was a systematic scheme that had siphoned nearly $200,000 from HOA reserves through fabricated medical expenses. But discovering the crime was only half the battle. I needed proof that would hold up under scrutiny, and I needed to present it in a way that would destroy Beverly's credibility before she could destroy mine. That's where I got lucky. The Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies had launched a statewide investigation into medical billing fraud, and they were specifically looking for cases involving fake workers' compensation claims. When I called their tip line and explained what I'd found, I got transferred to Detective Sarah Chen, a financial crimes investigator who specialized in exactly this kind of fraud. Detective Chen was intrigued but cautious. "Mr. Anderson, what you're describing sounds significant, but I need to ask, what's your relationship with the suspect? Are you involved in any personal disputes that might bias your interpretation of these documents?" I laughed. "Detective, she's trying to fine me $35,000 for making art in my garage. I'd say that qualifies as a personal dispute. Then we need to be extra careful about how we handle this. If your allegations are true, we're looking at felony theft and insurance fraud. But if this looks like retaliation for your HOA problems, it undermines the case." Detective Chen was right. I couldn't be the primary complainant in a case where I had obvious motive to fabricate evidence, but I could provide documentation to support an independent investigation. Over the next month, I worked with Detective Chen to organize the financial records and identify the strongest examples of fraud. She brought in a medical billing expert who confirmed that the procedures Beverly had billed for were not just expensive, they were medically impossible given the documented injuries and treatment timelines. Meanwhile, Beverly escalated her campaign against me to nuclear levels. She'd convinced 3 other board members to authorize a lawsuit against me for the accumulated fines, which now totaled over $50,000. She'd hired a private investigator to document every time I used my forge, building a case for willful violation of HOA covenants. She'd even contacted my insurance company to claim that my blacksmithing created a fire hazard that voided my homeowner's policy. But the most vicious attack came through something I never expected. Beverly somehow discovered that I was working on a commissioned sculpture for the new Veterans Memorial at Washington Park. The piece was a 5-foot bronze eagle that had taken me 4 months to design and fabricate, unpaid work that I donated to honor Colorado service members. She went to the memorial committee and claimed that accepting art from someone who was flagrantly violating community agreements would reflect poorly on the memorial's reputation. She provided documentation of my HOA fines, my industrial violations, and even suggested that my disruptive behavior indicated psychological issues that made me unsuitable to create art honoring veterans. The committee panicked and asked me to withdraw the sculpture. That hit harder than anything else she'd done. I'd put months of unpaid work and thousands of dollars of materials into creating something meaningful for people who'd sacrificed everything for their country. My grandfather had served in Korea, and this sculpture was my way of honoring both his memory and the veterans who couldn't make art for themselves anymore. Beverly had taken my livelihood, threatened my career, and tried to destroy my reputation. But attacking my contribution to a veterans memorial? That was personal in a way that crossed every line. That's when I decided to stop playing defense and destroy her completely. The opportunity came when Beverly made her final, fatal mistake. In October, just as Detective Chen was building her case, Beverly submitted a proposal to the HOA board for a comprehensive community health and safety assessment. She wanted to hire Colorado Occupational Health Services to evaluate noise pollution, air quality, and potential health hazards throughout Madison Grove. The cost, $25,000, to be paid from reserve funds. The same Dr. Marcus Webb who'd quoted $15,000 to document health impacts from my forge was now proposing to evaluate the entire community. Same inflated pricing, same unnecessary procedures, same pattern of fake medical expertise that I'd found in Beverly's previous billing. But this time, I had allies. Tom Martinez had been asking questions about HOA finances after I'd shared some of my concerns. Jennifer Walsh, a nurse who lived 2 streets over, had started wondering why the HOA was paying so much for employee medical claims when the maintenance crew consisted of 2 part-time groundskeepers. Most importantly, the Veterans Memorial Committee had decided to stand behind my sculpture after 3 decorated Marines showed up to their meeting and explained exactly what they thought of Beverly's interference with memorial honors. The November HOA board meeting was scheduled for the third Tuesday of the month. By pure coincidence, Detective Chen's investigation was reaching the point where she needed to interview Beverly formally about the medical billing discrepancies. I spent the week before that meeting preparing the most important presentation of my life. Not a defense of my blacksmithing. I was done apologizing for making art in my own garage. This was going to be a full-scale expose of Beverly Stanford's criminal enterprise, presented with the kind of documentation and professional analysis that would destroy her credibility permanently. I invited Detective Chen to attend as an observer. I contacted the Denver Post reporter who'd done the original story about neighborhood artisans and suggested she might want to cover a story about HOA corruption. I even reached out to Channel 9's investigative team and mentioned that they might be interested in a case involving stolen veterans' memorial funds. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland room with fluorescent lighting and folding chairs that usually hosted 20 or 30 residents. That night, over 100 people showed up. Beverly walked in wearing her standard board meeting outfit, navy business suit, leather portfolio, confident smile of someone who'd never lost a fight. She'd prepared her usual PowerPoint presentation about community finances, complete with charts showing how well reserve funds were performing under her management. She had no idea what was coming. The meeting started routinely. Minutes from the previous month, routine business items, a discussion about holiday decorations. Beverly presented her financial report with the same professional competence she'd displayed for 4 years. Then we reached new business, and I asked to address the board about my ongoing dispute with HOA fines. Beverly's smile got a little tighter, but she nodded graciously. Of course, Mr. Anderson, I think we've been very patient with your situation, but we're always willing to listen to residents' concerns. I walked to the front of the room carrying 2 boxes of documentation and a laptop connected to the projector. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, but standing there in front of 100 neighbors with Beverly's cold eyes watching my every move, I felt the weight of everything I was about to do. Beverly, you've spent 8 months trying to destroy my life because I make art in my garage. You've cost me over $50,000 in fines, threatened my professional license, and tried to sabotage a veterans memorial, all because you claim I'm violating community standards. I opened the first box and pulled out a thick folder of financial documents. But I've spent the last 2 months studying community standards under your management, and what I found is that you've been systematically stealing from this community for 4 years. The room went dead silent. Beverly's face went white, then red, then back to white. Mr. Anderson, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but making accusations. I'm not making accusations, Beverly. I'm presenting evidence. I clicked to my first slide, a summary of medical billing submitted by Beverly over 4 years, totaling $180,000 in workers' compensation claims. According to your financial reports, Madison Grove employs a maintenance staff that suffers more workplace injuries than a professional football team. They've received physical therapy at clinics that didn't exist, undergone procedures that are medically impossible, and somehow managed to be treated at multiple locations simultaneously. I clicked to the next slide, showing a detailed breakdown of one particularly obvious fraud. This invoice claims that maintenance worker John Rodriguez received 6 weeks of intensive physical therapy for a herniated disc at Denver Rehabilitation Partners in March 2022. Problem is, Denver Rehab Partners was sold and renamed 18 months before this treatment allegedly occurred. Beverly tried to interrupt, but I kept going. Here's another invoice for the same John Rodriguez, receiving full-body conditioning at Peak Performance Physical Therapy on the exact same dates he was supposedly bedridden with a herniated disc. Either John has superhuman healing abilities, or you've been billing for services that never happened. The slides kept coming. Fake clinics, impossible treatment schedules, medical procedures that violated basic understanding of human anatomy. I'd organized everything with the kind of detail that only someone who understood medical billing could provide. Over 4 years, Beverly Stanford has submitted nearly $200,000 in fake medical claims, pocketing the insurance reimbursements while depleting our reserve funds to cover the initial expenses. But I wasn't done. The second box contained something even more damaging. Beverly's been so focused on shutting down my forge that she got careless about covering her tracks. 3 weeks ago, she proposed spending $25,000 on another fake medical evaluation, using the same inflated pricing and impossible procedures I found in her previous billing. I pulled out Beverly's proposal for the community health assessment and displayed it next to examples of her previous fraudulent billing. Same pattern, same fake expertise, same Dr. Marcus Webb who doesn't actually exist in the Colorado Medical Licensing Database. That's when Detective Chen stood up in the back of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Detective Sarah Chen with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. I'm here tonight as part of an ongoing investigation into medical billing fraud. Ms. Stanford, I need to speak with you about discrepancies in workers' compensation claims filed under your management. Beverly looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Her carefully maintained composure cracked completely as she realized that her attempt to destroy me had led to her own exposure. I don't understand. These are all legitimate medical expenses. I have documentation. Ms. Stanford, the documentation you've provided bills for services at medical facilities that didn't exist during the claimed treatment dates. We've also discovered that several of the workers you claim received treatment were never employed by Madison Grove HOA. The room erupted. Residents who trusted Beverly with their money for 4 years were realizing they'd been systematically robbed by someone they'd elected to protect their interests. But I still had one more revelation that would ensure Beverly never recovered from this moment. There's something else everyone needs to know. Beverly didn't just steal money from our community, she tried to steal something from every veteran in Colorado. I clicked to a photo of the bronze eagle sculpture I'd created for the Veterans Memorial. 3 weeks ago, Beverly contacted the memorial committee and tried to prevent this sculpture from being displayed. She claimed that accepting art from someone who violated HOA rules would dishonor the memorial. The room got quiet again, but this was a different kind of silence. Dangerous quiet. What Beverly didn't know is that my grandfather served in Korea, and I created this piece to honor his memory and every veteran who sacrificed for our freedom. She tried to destroy that memorial because she was afraid my work would bring attention to her crimes. Tom Martinez stood up from his seat on the HOA board. He was 72 years old, Marine Corps veteran, and not someone you wanted to cross when he was angry. Beverly, I've served on this board for 8 years, and I trusted you with our community's financial future. Now you're telling me you stole nearly $200,000 from your neighbors while trying to sabotage a veterans memorial? Beverly was panicking now, looking around the room for support that wasn't coming. Every face was either angry, disgusted, or shocked. Her kingdom was collapsing in real time. Tom, there's been a misunderstanding. These medical expenses were legitimate. Lucas is twisting the documentation to make it look... Ms. Stanford, Detective Chen interrupted. I need you to come with me for questioning. We have evidence of systematic insurance fraud, and I'm placing you under arrest. The next few minutes were chaos. Beverly being read her rights, residents demanding answers about missing money, board members realizing they'd been accessories to fraud without knowing it. But the moment that made everything worthwhile came when Detective Chen handed me a business card. Mr. Anderson, the state's going to need your testimony as an expert witness. Your documentation was instrumental in building this case. Without your knowledge of medical billing, we might never have caught her. Beverly Stanford was charged with 17 counts of insurance fraud, embezzlement, and filing false financial reports. The state recovered most of the stolen money through asset forfeiture, and Beverly lost her CPA license, her house, and her freedom. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial and got 7 years in federal prison. The HOA dissolved all fines against me and formally apologized for the harassment. They also voted to change the community covenants to protect residents' rights to pursue legal, artistic, and professional activities. My bronze eagle was installed at the Veterans Memorial with a dedication ceremony attended by over 300 people, including the original memorial committee who apologized for doubting the project. But the best part was what happened to my forge. Instead of shutting it down, the community decided to embrace it. Madison Grove now advertises itself as an artisan-friendly neighborhood that supports residents' creative pursuits. I give blacksmithing demonstrations during the annual block party, and my workshop has become a neighborhood attraction that brings visitors from across Denver. My commission income has tripled since the story broke. Apparently, there's something appealing about buying art from someone who brought down a corrupt HOA with a hammer and his knowledge of medical billing. Most importantly, my mom's care is secure. The state offered a reward for exposing Beverly's fraud scheme, and that money plus increased art sales means she can stay in the memory care facility as long as necessary. Sometimes the good guys actually win. Sometimes the bully gets what's coming to them. And sometimes the skills you never thought you'd need turn out to be the exact weapons you need to fight back. Beverly thought she was dealing with just another resident she could intimidate into submission. She had no idea she was messing with someone who understood her crimes better than she did. The sound of my hammer on steel still echoes through Madison Grove every evening. But now, instead of complaints, it draws people who want to watch art being born from raw metal and honest work. And every time I fire up that forge, I remember my grandfather's words about the rhythm of hammer on steel being like meditation, something that could cure whatever was eating at your soul. He was right about that too.